We've now done some initial setup, and now it's time to actually start writing out our services. For this initial implementation, we're not going to worry too much about anything microservice-y or anything like that. We're really just going to put together some very basic functionality for the posts and comment service. So in other words, some very basic Express.js code to manipulate or deal with some very basic resources. We're going to first begin with our post service. Whenever you start designing a service or putting it together, it really is worth the time to think very critically about exactly what you want your service to do. So in our case, we know that we want to create a post and list all posts. But let's get a little bit deeper technical detail here and really truly understand what this thing needs to do. So here's my thought. For the post service, I think that we need to have a single route that's going to be in charge of retrieving all the different posts that have ever been created. I think we also need one distinct route that is going to be in charge of creating a brand new post. So we're going to have one route of posts. If we make a GET request to it, we'll get all of our posts. We'll have another one of /posts. If we make a post to it with some body that has a title that is a string, we're going to create a new post. So that's what we're going to use as our guide for implementing our post service. So let's open up our code editor inside the posts project directory right now. We're going to start to build out a very small Express application that's going to implement these two routes. So back at my terminal, you'll notice I've redone my layout here just so you can see these different terminal windows a little bit more easily. I'm going to find my posts terminal window and open up my code editor inside there. And then once inside there, I'm going to do an initial file I'm going to make right away of index.js. So we're going to write out just about all the code for application inside this one single file. At the very top, we're going to get access to Express. We're going to create a new Express application. We're going to set up those two different route handlers that we just discussed. It's all going to be some pretty straightforward Express-related stuff. Okay, so let's get to it. A little bit of typing here. So first off, we will require in Express. I'll create a new app. And then I'm going to associate those two different routes with the app we just created. So we'll do an app get to /posts, and I'll put in my route handler. And then if we ever make a post request to /posts, and we'll put in rec and res as well. Then at the bottom, right away, I'm going to make sure that my Express application listens on a very specific port. So I'm going to put in here app.listen. We're going to have this first service listen on port 4000. And then inside that callback, I'll say console log listening on 4000. All right, simple enough. Okay, so now let's start to implement these two different route handlers. I mentioned in passing just a moment ago in a previous video that we're not going to worry about any database or anything like that with these different services. So we're going to store all these different resources in memory. The downside to this approach is that anytime that we restart a service, we're going to lose all of our data, but that's totally okay for this initial little toy project that we're putting together. Right after I create my Express application, I'm going to make a little object that's going to be in charge of storing all the different posts that get created. I'll say const posts is an empty object like so. So this object is where we're going to store every post that we create. Now that we've got this kind of repository for all the different posts we're going to store, we can start to implement the first route handler right here that's going to retrieve all the different posts that have been created very easily. You can just say inside that route handler, let's send all of our posts. So now if anyone makes a GET request to /posts, we're going to send back all the posts that have been created. The next thing we have to do is make sure that we implement the ability to create a new post. So we have to add in some implementation for the post request handler to /posts. Remember that we probably want to eventually have some ID associated with every post that gets created. Right now, we don't really have any ability to create a ID of any sort, so let's add in a little bit of code to randomly generate an ID. Whenever someone makes a post request to /posts right here with the intent to create a post, we're going to randomly generate an ID, assign it to the object that the user just sent to us, and then store that entire thing. That's a little bit confusing for me to say, so let me just show you exactly what we're going to do. At the very top of the file, I'm going to add in an additional require statement. I'm going to require in random bytes from the crypto package. We're going to use random bytes right here to generate a new ID that we're going to assign to the post that the user is trying to create. So down inside the post request handler, I'm going to say const ID, and then we're going to generate our random ID right here. And we'll do that by using the random bytes function. We'll say random bytes. I want 4 bytes of random data. So this is just to get a random string for us. That's all we're doing here. We'll say toString hex. So that's going to give us a nice random looking ID. It'll look something like that, but it'll be actually hexadecimal. So we won't have like K's in there and H's and whatnot, but you get the idea. That's pretty much what we're going to have for our ID. So now the next thing we're going to do is take a look at the request that we just received from the user. Remember, we're making the assumption here that whenever a user makes a post request to this route, they're going to send along a body that has a title property inside of it. So we're going to pull out that title. We're going to generate that or take that randomly generated ID and then store them all together inside of our posts object up here that we just created. So let's get access to the title that the user just sent to us. We'll say rec.body. We'll then add in a new key at the ID that we just generated on our posts object, and I'll assign to that the ID and the title. And then finally, down here at the bottom, after we add in that brand new post, let's send back a response to the user to let them know that, hey, we have now created a new post for you. It's all good to go. I'll do a res. I'm going to set a manual status here of 201, which indicates we just created a resource. And then I'll send back posts at ID, which again is the post that we just created. All right, so this is looking pretty good. There's one last little thing we have to do. We need to make sure that we add in a body parser to make sure that whenever a user sends us some JSON data in the body of a request, it actually gets parsed, and so it actually shows up appropriately inside of a request handler. So just a little bit of administration work with Express.js. At the very top of the file, I'm going to add in a require statement for body parser. And then right after we generate our app, we'll do an app.use body parser.json like so. Okay, and that should be it. So the code that we have here should be good to go. It implements both of these different features or these routes that we just discussed. The last thing we should do is add in a script to our package.json file to start this project up. We can then take a quick break and then do some testing this thing in the next video. So inside of my package.json file, I'm going to find the script section. I'm going to remove the default script inside there, and I'll replace it with a start script that will run nodemon index.js like so. I'll then save that. And then finally, I'm going to go back over to my terminal. I'll find my posts terminal window, and I'll do an npm start inside there. And I should see something that says listening on 4000. Very good. Okay, so now that we've got this thing up and running, our first little service, quick pause right here, and we'll do a quick test of this thing in the next video just to make sure that it's working as expected.